Hello and welcome back to Byron of Goatland. Today we will be focusing on recent events that have changed in the world and hopefully spend some time on the general world situation as well from the comfort of my bathrobe. Now, as I record this video and as you watch this video, please keep in mind that there's likely to be some video lag, specifically in the top right corner here, just probably due to the limitations of my PC. But do not worry, the audio should still work as fine, and we should still be synchronized with the primary video content of this video. Now, let's begin. So, to be fair, I cannot speak in great detail about many of the theaters that I spoke about in my last theater of war, such as Africa or America, as I've not heard of significant updates in those regions. But I can speak in some detail about Ukraine. But before we get into all that, I want to first talk about the world globalist schema. So you can get some sense of this from what I have here. And so this is what I call the red team, blue team, green team schema. So in case you're not familiar, blue team, from our perspective, is sort of like our side. So we have broadly the United States as sort of its central figure, aligned with other countries such as Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, the United Kingdom, Ukraine, Estonia, Lithuania, Finland, and other countries to a lesser extent. So the placement of these countries generally represents two things. So it represents their political or ideological commitment, and it also, to some extent, represents their geographical position. So, before we get into that, let's go into the other corners of the world triangle. So, the other corner of the world triangle on the opposite end is red team. So, red team is, they used to be communist countries, and to some extent, they still might be, but there's not necessarily like an unifying ideology. These countries, or some of them, were what George Bush would have referred to as the axis of evil. And I don't want to be so judgmental, I think evil can exist on both sides, at least in different forms. And so I don't want to say too much in that respect. But we can be relatively confident that the nations of red team are relatively opposed to the nations of blue team. And I use these terminologies because the incentives have an interlocking aspect, an interrelational aspect, where the opposition of one country to another, in terms of their interests and their history, leads to certain alliances and other types of conflicts arising. So, for example, we have, the nation of Russia. And so Russia does have some auxiliary entities like their People's Republics and the Wagner Organization. And then they have the Union State of Belarus. And they have Kazakhstan, which they have a lot of influence over. And they have the CSTO alliance. So, you probably saw this flag and you weren't sure what it was. This is the flag of CSTO, which is the Russian equivalent of NATO. And while it might not be as relevant as NATO, it does still have a symbolic equivalence to NATO. And so we can see how symmetrical the NATO flag is, while the CSTO flag is actually not symmetrical. So, I just noticed that. That could be an ideological implication related to these organizations. So, anyway, I would like to speak about how the positions of these flags was determined in general. So, for example, I'm trying to group them up into geographic clusters. So, for example, with Russia, I tried to add its nearby states. So we have the People's Republics of Donbass and Luhansk. We have the Wagner Group. We have Belarus. We have CSTO, Kazakhstan, and then a bit further out, then we have China, North Korea, the Houthis, Hezbollah, Venezuela, Palestine, Hamas, Iran, Pakistan. I put Uganda and the Central African Republic here. Notice, however, that I put them relatively close to the center line because I don't think they're super into it, but I think if they had to pick a side, they might have a preference for red team in the situation. I could get more into that later if you like. I decided to put Bolivia on red team. Mongolia is slightly on red team. Iraq, Cuba, Laos, Cambodia, Serbia, Montenegro, Armenia, um, fuck, Sudan. Yeah, this is Sudan. Eritrea, Somalia. I put Singapore in the middle, along with Azerbaijan, Myanmar, Burma, Afghanistan, and then in this corner I put green team. So green team is sort of like the independent faction. Like, they don't want to get involved. They might get forced to be involved. Maybe they want to stay out of it. So that's why, like, towards this end, I put Somaliland, Singapore, Somalia, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Lebanon, and Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea, I don't really think is seriously going to join Red Team, but whatever. I had to put them somewhere. It's called inclusion. So with Uzbekistan, there's currently some threat that Russia will annex Uzbekistan. So that's why I have Uzbekistan slightly leaning towards blue team. The ideology of Uzbekistan, the culture of Uzbekistan, is not compatible that much with blue team. But they don't want to be annexed by Russia. I'm confident about that. So, with that being the case, they could be forced or pressured into joining blue team, due to Russian aggression. And then in the same way, like we have countries like Nepal and Bhutan, like Nepal even had a communist revolution in 2006, which is very recent. But I'm sure they don't want to be invaded by China. They don't want to have their territory taken by China. So that's why I have them adjacent to India. And then India, I think, is aligned with the United States. But Indians, their mindset, it's not exactly what would be ideal for a blue team worldview. So I think they want to be independent. They want to be peacemakers. They have their own local conflicts that they care about. I don't think they're super excited about participating in the blue world schema. So that's why I put them in more towards green team. And in a similar way, I think the nation of Turkey is aligned with blue team, but not as much as like Israel or Poland or Australia. And so Turkey, they might want to attack Greece. I put little Greece over here. So Turkey might want to attack Greece to seize more land. They've already taken part of Syria. I put Syria over here, by the way. And so Turkey, could, I won't necessarily say Turkey could join Red Team, really, because they still have a strategic interest against Russia, and then Russia is a greater threat than Greece. But this is to indicate that Turkey could slide towards Green Team. So, under the current leadership of Erdogan, however you pronounce his name, I think Turkey, at least under that leadership, wants to attack other countries, invade other countries, take more land, get more prestige, boost testosterone, stuff like that. So that can lead them really towards Green Team, just like doing their own thing, attacking other people independently, type of vibe. And, in a similar way, Afghanistan is an interesting situation where it could go either way, actually. So even though, of course, obviously the Taliban was fighting the United States Army, but, the United States is withdrawn, they left behind a lot of equipment, maybe they could frame it as a donation, and, Afghanistan has been having some border clashes with both Iran and Pakistan. They have conflicts over refugees, subversion of the border, water resources. So with that being an issue, it's possible for Afghanistan to be more closely aligned with Blue Team, despite the historical grievances of recent past. And in the same way, Afghanistan, due to its history of being basically, I guess, anti-America, they could be drawn into Red Team. They might be compelled into it, similar to Mongolia. they're just kind of surrounded by red team and they're just kind of forced to play along. So that's kind of uncertain, but we'll just have to see what happens. If there's any alliance that forms between Afghanistan and the Taliban, sorry. If there's any alliance that forms between Afghanistan and the United States in the next 5 years, someone is obligated to pay me $20. How about that? All right, so how about we switch a bit up? So I wanted to do a quick overview of what conflicts are currently happening right now and what might happen in the future. So for conflicts currently ongoing, we have the Russian invasion of Ukraine, of course, the Israeli invasion of Gaza, bombing campaign of Yemen. I would say for all of these campaigns, the invader is making progress. So Russia has, as you know, probably know, Russia has recently seized the town of Avdiivka, which is sort of a major milestone in their conquest. Israel has been making more and more progress into Gaza, seizing more land and killing more Hamas, killing more Palestinians. So I think they're progressing in their goals. And then we have the bombing campaign of Yemen. So, the Americans, blue team has gone in, they've killed some Yemenis, they've killed some Houthis, I'm sure, they destroyed some infrastructure. Now the Houthis are threatening to cut the internet lines, which could be a big deal. And I think it's something that they could actually do, but that's sort of like a nuclear option. Like, I I know if my internet connection was threatened that severely, I'd be willing to like drop a nuke on Yemen. But it's not necessarily American internet connection that's threatened, it's the European Asian connection that's threatened. So maybe if a European country decided to nuke Yemen as a retaliation for cutting the internet lines, that's something I could understand where they're coming from, so, like, sympathetically. Anyway, so let's go on to wars or conflicts that might start this year or next year. So China might invade Taiwan. I'd still put the chance at like 10% this year. Like I said before, it's not super likely. So let's put some probabilities on this. So James's estimates. So here we got, I'll say a 10% chance that China invades Taiwan this year. Ethiopian invasion of Eritrea. I'll put that at 20%. And okay. Egyptian Sunnis attack on Ethiopia. Okay, it's a little out there, but it's a little plausible. 15%. Okay, escalated direct conflict between Iran and Blue Team. This is pretty vague, actually. So I'm gonna put this at 25%. Okay, Venezuela and Suriname's invasion of Guyana. This would be a very ballsy move. So I put this at like 7%. And then Serbian invasion of Kosovo is not super likely right now, at least for this year. So let's put this part in parentheses, just to bracket it off. So Serbian invasion of Kosovo, I currently put that at 2% for this year. Serbia is a small country, and even though they might be able to beat the Albanians on their own, as long as NATO and the United States are not super distracted, it would be very hard for Serbia to get away with invading Kosovo. So I'll just put that in 2% for now. Escalated border conflict between Afghanistan, either Iran and or Pakistan. Let's see. This is pretit's vague too, actually. All right, so escalated border conflict between Afghanistan, either Iran and or Pakistan. So that's pretty vague. So it's easy to meet this criteria. So I would say let's put it at like 22%. Okay, and then potential conflicts between India, Pakistan, Bhutan, Nepal, and China. This is also a vague category. So I'll put this at 12%. Okay, conflict between North Korea and Blue Team. Ooh. Okay, so it's very risky. I'll put this at 8%. American intervention against cartels in Mexico. I'll just put that at 1%. So that's this number 10, by the way. I don't think this is going to happen under the Biden administration. This is more like a Trump administration, 2025, 2026 type of maneuver. Okay, and then let's go ahead and switch to Google Earth for the next part of this video. So I'd like to talk about some things that might happen. So the Google Earth is going to be, it has to load. So I'd like to focus in on, what has happened recently in Ukraine. So with Ukraine, they have been losing territory, and at this rate, I expect them to definitely officially, permanently lose some territory. In the peace agreement, I expect this war to end with a peace agreement where the West, I'm expecting that within a few years, Russia could annex all of eastern Ukraine. And by eastern Ukraine, I mean the territory east of the Dnieper River. Excuse me if I mispronounced that. So for context, here we have the city of Kyiv. It's relatively to the far north, with some of its territory on the eastern bank. So there are a few bridges we can see across this river in Kyiv. I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm seeing like a maximum of like 9 bridges across this river. Oh, there's a 10th bridge. So there are multiple options for bridge crossings, east to west, vice versa. And then I'm not sure if this is a farmland or if this is marsh. It's a bit laggy, even on my end, just a little slow. So I would say if the Russians make it this far, it's going to be a fall of Berlin type of vibe, if you know what I mean. And then let's see, this river, does it really start here? This seems to be like a major reservoir, so there might be like a dam. Yes, there is a dam. So there's some type of dam here that's I think this showed up during the 2022 start of the invasion in February, around February 24th, the anniversary of which is coming up, by the way. Just for some additional information, the birthday of Arthur Schopenhauer was February 22nd of I believe 1788. So it's soon going to be Schopenhauer's birthday. So the great philosopher of pessimism, as he's often known. I'm just currently tracing the origin of the river, of the Dnieper, and it seems to go pretty far north. So I think we're definitely in Belarus right now, Mogilev. Anyway, so the origin of this river is in Belarus, but in Belarus it's much smaller, while in Ukraine it's a much larger body of water. So, in case you're not familiar, I'm going to outline with my cursor the current approximate battle lines between Russia and Ukraine. So Russia, up to this point, which is the Osal Reservoir, Russia controls the territory south of the Dnieper River. But to the east, Ukraine still holds a significant amount of territory east of the Dnieper River. And they have relatively strong or uncontested control of the northern part of eastern Ukraine. And then here, Russia recently seized a city called Avdiivka, which I believe is in the Donetsk region, or possibly Luhansk. So let's take a look here. Severodonetsk, Kramatorsk, Bakhmut. So here's Bakhmut. So Bakhmut was lost a bit further back to the Russians, and it's a relatively major city. You can see, looking at the map, how developed it is compared to the surrounding countryside. And then you can notice how there's another city here, Kostiantynivka, Avdiivka. So this city looks very of similar size to Bakhmut. It's probably still under Ukrainian control, but we could expect it to fall probably within 6 months if the current rate of progress continues. So I'm currently looking for the city of Avdiivka, and I'm not sure where it actually is. So I'm going to try to look around here a bit longer and see if I can find it. So let's see, Avdiivka. So Donetsk Oblast. Yes, that's what I'm looking for. So Avdiivka is a bit further south. That's what I thought. And so, all right, this is the city of Avdiivka. You can see how large it is, actually. You can see how much development is on this land compared to the surrounding region. It looks longer and like more skinny than Bakhmut. I'll say that. And we can notice this surrounded with farmland, buildings. On a tangent, I used to wonder, like, why do armies fight over cities? Because why do they care so much about cities during the war? And the reason I had this question is that the city cannot be used much for economic activity while the war is going on. A lot of people have fled, things like that. And what I concluded, or what I learned, is that even if a city is like abandoned or basically has an economic activity, it can still be useful because the shelters already exist. So part of the dynamic of the soldiers or armies fighting for these cities is that by taking the city, they can have pre-made shelter and decently quality shelter for their soldiers. In the United States, there's a constitutional amendment, I believe it's the Third Amendment, against the housing of soldiers in private residences, which doesn't come into question or comment very often. But here in the Russia-Ukraine military context, they probably don't have such an amendment. And even if they did, it wouldn't matter that much because a lot of these homes are probably abandoned. Anyway, so the city of Avdiivka has fallen to the Russians quite completely. And the Russians have already seized some land to the west. And we notice the city of Stepove is directly to the north, which was a major point of contact between the Russian and Ukrainian militaries. And so the Russians probably control this area as well. I might call it a town, but it looks quite small. It looks like a very small town, perhaps a village is the most appropriate description for that location. So now that Avdiivka has fallen, the question is, like, how does this relate to other parts of the map? So I would be inclined to believe that the rest of the territory to the east and south of this city, Avdiivka, is going to be controlled by Russians. And then the Ukrainians would then be subject to lose more and more territory to the west. So if Ukraine has any holding of the city of Donetsk or this region, they're more and more likely to lose such control. And you can see how big Donetsk is as a city compared to other such areas like Avdiivka or Bakhmut. So the Russians are likely to continue moving forward. We can see, if you look at this map here, we notice that it's mostly farmland and tree lines between Avdiivka and Sayildove. So assuming that the Russians already have complete control of the city of Donetsk, whatever I should call this, then I would estimate, I would give it basically a year for the Russians to go to conquer this city, assuming they haven't already. I feel a bit, I think I need to I wish I had done a bit more research about the exact positions. But I think I'm relatively confident about my broad estimates. So just for context, this is the city of Avdiivka, and then never mind. Okay, so that's Avdiivka right there, and then Bakhmut. Where's Bakhmut? Okay, I'm not seeing it. It's Horlivka, Torets, Konstanivka. Interesting. Okay, there's Bakhmut. So Bakhmut is further to the north and east. Oh my God. Oh my God. All right. The software is malfunctioning a little bit. Okay. So anyway, my general estimate is that the Russians are likely to take the majority of their land that they're claiming this year. So, for context, Russia claims to have annexed four provinces of Ukraine: Kherson, this might be Melitopol, Donetsk, and Luhansk. So, they already control the majority of these provinces. Now, they do not control the city of Kherson. They were defeated and driven from that city. But if Russia wanted to, I do think they could annex, or they could make a peace deal with Ukraine and possibly force Ukraine to forfeit their claims to these four provinces, at least the majority of them. So Russia might keep the land south and to the east of the river for these four territories, and then maybe allow Ukraine to keep part or all of the major cities that they're not able to currently control. And then, as for taking more territory, I think that will take more effort. That would take more blood. And there's currently a situation where, I'm not sure what is the most likely outcome for the situation. So, but I think that's normal. But I do have a few different estimates. So, my current estimate is that Russia could annex, or they could make a peace deal with Ukraine to annex these four territories this year. The Ukrainians are having a bad time. They're low on resources, and so they may have to give up some land in order to have peace, at least temporarily. But extending that, I think the Russians may want to go further. So some people think that they want to take over all of Ukraine. I think that might be too much to do. So if you let's look at the map together. How about that? So if Russia annexed all of Ukraine, that would actually be a huge liability. I don't think it would be a very good idea, because they would have all this open, exposed land, and they'd be directly adjacent to NATO. So, say like they'd be directly adjacent to Poland, and all they'd have is trees, maybe some hills, and otherwise relatively flat fields. It would be relatively difficult to defend that land if they went that far, and they would be I think they would be overextended if they went that far. If you look at the geography, the most congruent policy for the Russians at this time would be to annex all of eastern Ukraine, and then maybe impose certain restrictions on western Ukraine, and then they'd have basically a congruent border. So I think eastern Ukraine would be relatively easy to annex and integrate compared to western Ukraine. And then western Ukraine is more similar to a western country, a western European country. It's more closely aligned with Poland and other neighboring states to the west and the south. And to build off that, another major influence is this river, the Dnieper River. The Dnieper River adds a significant geographical barrier that the Russians can use for defending their gains. And so, if they want, I think the best strategy they can use is to I think the right balance between aggression and defense would be to annex all the land east of the Dnieper River. Now, to achieve that, if the Ukrainians can sustain the same level of resistance that they've been doing, I think it could probably take like 3 years for Russia to take all this land. And that would make this basically a 4-year-long war or a 5-year-long war, maybe 6. And that's pretty long, but they might think it's worth it. And that time estimate is based on Ukraine actually being able to put up that much resistance for such a long time. But Ukraine does have some significant vulnerabilities. They have difficulties with funding. They have difficulties with manpower, especially trained professional manpower. And they also have difficulties with ammunition and supplies. And so they're very dependent on foreign assistance. And, as foreign assistance is going to dry up, then the Ukrainians are going to struggle to, hold the land they have, let alone take back the land they've lost. So that's part of the reasoning I've made for my predictions. So, the United States can at least pretend to have a lot of money, but I do think the United States does not have as much money as the people of the United States would like to believe. And in the future, I hope to make another video and title it the fake economy of the United States. And perhaps at another time, I may dedicate a video to why we are continuing to have wars and why we're not having the eternal secular verbal peace that some people were expecting. But for now, I think that's as long as we need to speak about this for today, for this video at least. Anyway, in case you like this content, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Use the donation feature if that is available. I am Byron the Goat Man, signing out.